Good evening, and welcome to the IPR Game Room. Tonight we're talking about the incredibly disturbing World War I horror role-playing game, Never Going Home. Now, if you're a history buff, and specifically a military history buff, and you may very well be, you probably already know that World War I is the suckiest of wars. Really, as far as being a combatant, the worst war imaginable. The war that rolled over the old world of the 19th century into the technological world of the 20th century and managed to incorporate the worst of both. A lot of great writers have written about it. A lot of great people have written about it. A lot of terrible people were there and wrote about it. World War I was a horrifying event to live through. And it essentially gave birth to World War II. They're not really even separable. The idea behind Never Going Home is that you are a soldier in World War I. You're never going home, as you find out playing the game, because you're going to die or go insane and turn into some horrible thing that can't die, which is even worse than dying. It's the period between 1916 and 1918, and the incredible horrors of World War I have ripped asunder the veil to the others, kind of the old gods. They're not really spelled out that way. And the whispers have come through. And the whispers slowly corrupt you as a character. And the more corrupt you get, the more you can use magic to help your squad try to achieve your goals. But the more you use it, the more corrupt you get and the more you can use. So essentially, you're trapped in a cycle of being a soldier. You're trying to complete military goals. You're trying to complete missions. The entire game's mission-based, in fact. But as you do so, you go more and more insane or die. And at some point, you become something completely inhuman and you just sort of wander off. You create a new character, because this game isn't really focused around individual characters, though you create them, and there's a very interesting process for doing it. But it's really focused around the squad or the group. And people die, people go crazy, people desert and get shot for desertion. Tens of thousands of men killed for desertion on both sides in World War I, very common. Or you turn into a monster and leave. Or you go halfway and you're still trying to help, but you've already become like a horrible Lovecraftian nightmare thing that's trying to help your squad. It's very dark and it's very cool. And the artwork is just fantastic and unique. And pretty much, I think, all done by a single artist or one or two artists. And it's all deeply disturbing and shocking to look at. Everyone's always got gas masks of various sorts on. Everyone's sprouting tentacles and antlers. Everyone's, having bone charms and medallions and occult junk hanging off of them. But they're World War I soldiers. It's really a beautiful, little, intense, horrible book. I love it. Game system itself is called I think it's the +1 system. And it's an interesting system. Basically, it revolves around two things. Rolling six-sided dice and succeeding by getting basically critical hits most of the time, 4 or 5 or 6, depending on how difficult something is, and getting a certain number of them. So you're going to have to get, to achieve this thing, you're going to have to get 5 critical hits or 3 critical hits. And you want to be able to roll a certain number of six-sided dice as a character and then hit a certain number of crits. And then you succeed or fail. There's also things you have to do as a group because you're a squad. So there's certain actions that you take as a group where everyone's rolling together trying to achieve something simultaneously. The second part of the game mechanic are playing cards. And the playing cards are handed out and they represent, I won't go into great detail, but they represent certain skills and abilities or certain suits of things represent various things. But that's not really the important part. The important part is you play them during play, and every time you play them, you become a little less human. You lose memories, you lose personality. You're slowly subsumed in a nightmare of the war. And as you play your cards, to tap various abilities, there's less and less of you. It's really very ingenious, very, very clever. So in conclusion, fantastically disturbing horror role-playing game in a unique setting. You have to really be in this kind of thing to play. You know, it's not about you developing a character that's going to have some long story arc with a happy ending. It's not about that. You're not into it for that. It has a lot of influences I immediately recognized. For those of you who've never watched Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, I was reading it and thinking, man, this really reminds me of the 6-part Dan Carlin Hardcore History podcast series about the hells of World War I. And then I found a Dan Carlin Hardcore History quote in here. Highly recommended. 10 hours of your life, though, but you won't regret it. Pick it up. You won't regret it. It's great and available for Indie Press Revolution. And follow us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our newsletter. And remember, gamers, when you're frightened in the depths of the night, it's not a trench stalker. Probably.